So I'm going to start recording now. Hi,
Wait,
everybody.
Wait. Can I just ask what defines the highway business district? How is that defined? Like from Valley Medical back to town, or longer, or
Less.
A little bit
Less?
less, yeah.
okay? I was just
Casey
curious.
talked to Valley Medical. And 300 feet back, it's there's a depth.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. So
Sorry.
let's get this meeting started. Welcome to the December 15th, 2020 EDIC meeting. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. No in-person attendance of members of the public or of the committee is going to be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access these proceedings. A recording will be made available via Easthampton Media. Wear a mask in public. Those are the rules. Do your part. Okay, so I would like to approve the November 17th, 2020 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, holler aye.
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 Okay.
Abstained.
Did you say abstained?
Wasn't at the last meeting.
I wasn't either, but did you read the minutes?
I did.
Okay. Do you approve the minutes?
Sure. I approve of what I read.
Great, me too. Okay, so we've got a unanimous, how many are there of us? 5 of 5. Okay. There are no members of the public here to speak. I would like to use a portion of our agenda to comment on the fact that one of EDIC's longstanding members, Dave Boyle, shared with me that he has decided not to renew his appointment to EDIC, having given his life's blood to this work for, as far as I can tell, 1,000 years. And
well, Tom has more service than I do, so.
I know, but
I'm older than you, Dave.
Right. So we're grateful to you. I wish that we could have a mini party. I wish I could give you a cupcake. I hope you make yourself a cupcake.
All right.
We're very grateful that you gave your time and effort to this. There are bigger or smaller, but definitely better and interesting things in your future. Hooray. Thanks.
Well, thanks. But there's people in town that can step up. There's a lot of talent in town.
For sure. Yep.
Thanks, Dave.
So this is a call to folks to rally the people who are interested in doing this kind of thinking with us and get your name in the appointment process.
We have your number if we need you.
Oh yeah, if you could please share your number on air. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Jeff, I've given you the next section updates, including anything that we know, news on the MDI initiative, wayfinding grant, housing production plan, which I was very interested to read. That is some fine work. So what would you like to share with us?
Perfect, thank you. For the wayfinding, we are in a little bit of a lull. The next step will be to convene a relatively small group of Easthampton stakeholders in the range of 15 to 20 people who it looks like we would do it electronically via Zoom, but it's called an ideation. It's an exercise that the consultant has to gather ideas and input on what kind of, one essence is, what does Easthampton mean to you? And then are there images, are there places, or are there things that, represent Easthampton to you? And he's got a process where he gathers all of that input and then will formulate, that he'll take that information and begin to formulate sort of whether we have sort of an iconic image a singular image that would represent Easthampton. And if you think, Mount Tom was the one that came up in the small working group. Mount Tom is like one of these iconic things. And then one of the exercises is then each of our sub-districts. So Cottage Street, Union Street, Main Street, and Pleasant Street, could there be a way to have an image or a graphic that would represent those? And then from there, it would evolve into potential some rough sign locations and I forget what the terminology was, sort of like a menu of wayfinding things that we could be considering in the future. So that's signs. It goes all the way down to things like benches. And the consultant has been very impressed with where Easthampton is at currently, with things like artist-made bike racks, murals is a big one. There's a lot, and then there's like the activities that we've done. So the lighting up Cottage Street, lighting up the gazebo, in the roundabout, and then like the old town hall, beacon lights, and the newer ones. So it's this family of wayfinding things that we would be looking at moving forward in the future. So last time we spoke, we want to try to aim for presenting a plan to City Council probably at this point, probably in like May. And then that would give us the basis to keep moving forward. So as of right now, I'm just trying to work on a stakeholder list, and I think many of you would be included in that. So it's a very just broad brush overview. I think in February I should be able to, or January, I should be able to give you like a more concise update, especially with a meeting time and things like that. The housing production plan has completed a first draft. It's a complete draft. And so I did send it to Gwen. Gwen, I don't know if you had a chance to forward it onto this committee. Okay, so the process generally that we have mapped out right now is our target is for January 20th. It's a city council meeting. The target would be to convene the planning board and city council together in a joint meeting. And this is the culmination of this with the consultant at that meeting, and look for city council and planning board to adopt the housing production plan. So kind of working backwards from that, we transmitted it last week as the draft. And then there's an opportunity for you all to provide comments or questions. And I guess I didn't articulate that to Gwen, but I think if this group has any comments or questions, if we want to channel them at least to Gwen, and then we can get them to the consultant. I think by the end of December would be useful to, if you find anything that's glaringly wrong or something that doesn't look right in terms of data. But for this group, there's a couple of things that you might really be interested in. The consultant at request of a couple of people, couple of groups, the Affordable Fair Housing Group, myself, and a couple other people, to really build a more robust set of action items. And so in there, you will see some draft zoning changes, some things that we can do to hopefully make housing development easier. So those are important things that I know this group was really tuned into. So looking at that section would be important. And then the consultant did 4 site evaluations. They're not survey level. They're not necessarily to get built, but they are to show what certain build out could look like, and whether or not it might need a zoning change to actually make that happen. I will say it's important to note that the property owners generally were not consulted. These are either properties that were on the list from the 2014 plan. And so we just found that, yes, they still make sense to be included, or a couple of them were properties that are listed currently for sale or have recently been listed for sale. So we kind of use these as our criteria. There's a couple interesting, properties there. And that's intended to help us understand that it could be possible to produce new housing. And there's here's how. So I think if there's a way for any of this committee's members to be available on January 20th, that would be a really important meeting to be at, to potentially say something in favor of the plan, the work that you all have done to kind of push this, into being. It's really something that this committee really drove me to find the funding, and we've initiated it. And then housing production plan is a required document for affordable housing, and it's really the first piece of this study. Then kind of quickly to follow that is looking at accessory dwelling units as like a specific thing and how we can make it easier to do that. And then the last piece is a little bit more of a comprehensive look at all housing types and kind of just setting up like a vision, for Easthampton for the next 10 or 20 years. Like, okay, so here's the needs that you have established, and here's a vision. And so that's part of like what we're trying to do is these mini master plans. And so this is kind of the idea for the housing component.
Again,
should I pause for- yeah.
Just catching something briefly
Yep.
on a city council meeting. And again, I don't know how the city council, pro or con, how they're going to receive this, but there was something I caught briefly that was comments from Councilor Peak. And I wasn't sure if you had heard those, if there was something negative he had brought out about the plan. I'm at a little bit of a loss for not knowing exactly what that conversation was.
I can give you an educated guess. So there is another thing, the big thing is in front of City Council, which is a alternative tax payment request from the developer of One Ferry Street.
Mhm.
So it's basically a TIF, to lower the taxes that developer will pay over 20 years.
Yep.
And there was a housing discussion associated with that, along the lines of why isn't there affordable housing included in that project? And I think Councilor Peak was a little bit dismayed at our zoning doesn't require affordable housing as part of a project. And I think that's one conversation that I know that happened publicly that I have heard. During an affordable fair housing meeting, I know Councilor Peak was a little bit challenged with how this has taken a little bit longer to come from the idea of and hiring the consultant and getting going. I have a lot of that to blame. COVID. This is just one of the projects that definitely slowed down a little bit. So I know that he was a little bit critical of this has taken a long time, and there's a lot of interest in moving to the next step, which is to start talking about zoning. So those are the two things that I have personally heard and witnessed. But
So no underlying issue that you can see that would cause the council to not approve this plan.
no, not that I'm aware of, and that would be new information. So if that's the case, then that would be new information for me.
No, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. So
Yeah.
Good, thanks.
So that's quick on that. And then, Gwen, if it's okay, there's two other things that are time sensitive that I just wanted to make sure this group was aware of. These things keep happening where it's just basically like a giant snowball, and it's like it's this big right now. But there's two grants that we're going to apply for on behalf of the whole city, but they both relate to business, support in some way. There's one that's kind of newly released, is called Local Rapid Recovery, and it's through DHCD. But what they're doing is they're not offering money; they're offering consulting services for communities to assess, to kind of figure out and really take a deep dive and assess what's happening in response to COVID to businesses, and then formulate an action plan. And the action plan would be short-term things that the community could do to support businesses as early as like spring and next summer. And then there's midterm actions, and then there would be longer term actions. So I have had a conversation with Mo Beliveau, and I think we're gonna pair up the planning department and the chamber to just write sort of some narrative and a request to get these consulting services in Easthampton. It's like a 3-page narrative that we have to build, and Mo's gonna articulate the things that she has done on behalf of the chamber members with providing information about PPP and all this stuff. And then, I'm going to articulate the things that we've done. We changed the zoning to make it easier for business. We got, a lot of money from the state to support, the small business grants, the $10,000 grants. And then we've created rental relief through CPA for renters. And we have ECA who's done small artist grant, things. So those are we've done a lot. And I think the idea is that we could use some help to pull all these different components of businesses together and really assess what the business needs are looking like for the spring and summer and fall probably, and then come up with a action plan. And I'm almost done, but like the action plan is really important for us because if it's articulated well, the idea is we'd have like 20 projects. And the expectation right now is that the state is going to keep pumping out opportunities, funding opportunities. And when they release a funding source, we can look at our list and say, this one meets this funding source, and we try to go for it. So it's going to really make us more prepared. The expectation is that there's going to be a lot of funding and getting kind of put out to try to help. And we need the action plan to kind of give us a little guidance. So I would imagine this consultant, it would be like February, the consultant would come on board. And I think the main thing that I would need the most help with is like the consultant would meet with you all, and the consultant would meet with the chamber, and the consultant would meet with the mill owners, and the consultant would meet with the Cottage Street Business Association, and the chamber would meet with, the consultant would meet with, Casey Corsello working on the blueprint, and really just pull all these parts together. So that's due on Friday at 3. Yeah, but it's really something that I wasn't going to do it. I have very little capacity, and Mo, was a little hesitant, but then we started to realize that we don't want to miss this opportunity. All we have to do is put together this narrative and kind of articulate some of our needs and hope for the best that we get the consultant. So we didn't want to pass it up. I saw Kathy had a question.
Yeah, I would think we'd need to demonstrate need. And so one thought I have is, do we want to say that we're stuck in a few places, that we've tried to promulgate some ideas and plans, but that we haven't been able to successfully resolve them, and we would benefit from counsel?
Yeah.
If you want me to write that paragraph, I'll write it.
Well, I guess that's one question that we do have a quorum here, is whether in the next day or two, whether there would be some idea of a letter of support from EDIC, capturing kind of like what Cassie just said, because I think that might be meaningful in terms of having it in with the application. As of right now, the mayor will write a letter of support, and then Mo, the chamber, would write a letter of support, and it could be good for EDIC to write a letter of support. And Cassie, I think the question for me would be, I know that at one of the early spring meetings, there was the idea of closing a street or reducing a lane to support restaurants. And I know that had some kind of initial reaction, but that would be an example of if we had a consultant who could work through some of the questions or kinks and talk to businesses and formulate, so that I would see that as an action item, like to support restaurants and allow conversion of parking spaces.
We had that. We had the, for lack of a better word, outdoor cafeteria.
Yeah.
There were a whole bunch of ideas we came up with.
Yep. And
It's
so
a good
we just
instance,
didn't know
Cassie,
how
to
to take that
demonstrate that
first
we've
step.
tried.
Yes, that would be technical assistance. Like I think with the courtyard or the cafe, the courtyard idea, it's a lot of working out the liquor license process and then any other permitting process. So it'd be technical assistance for those kind of things.
So you would value a letter of support from EDIC. Cassie, do you have bandwidth for a paragraph plus?
On what I just talked about?
Yeah, basically that could be part of, that could be the main thrust of our support of this, is
I'm
that
happy to do
this,
that.
along the lines of other things that other elements of the city's municipal departments has worked on, this is what we're struggling with in
I
particular.
could definitely do that.
Here have been our good faith efforts. Please help.
When
Yeah.
do you want it?
By Friday.
Yeah.
How about Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, I would just throw it out and you can tell me if that's crazy, but like Thursday by like noon, if I
Yeah.
had at least, yeah, that would be helpful because then I can, what I like to do with letters of support is then I will also usually incorporate some of the text into the narrative because usually it's good. Usually it's useful to do that. Okay, so that's great. I mean, I think it's an opportunity and it's something where I don't want to be, yeah, I guess it kind of fell on me and I'm okay with that, but I didn't want to be the person who said I can't do that. If every single town around us gets a little bit of consulting help, I want to have that too for all of us. All right, so that's really helpful. I appreciate it. And again, I'm sorry that this is kind of just coming up right now, but that's how my life is these days.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
Jeff, just real quick. Cassie mentioned, us trying to help out the restaurants. Paul put that plan together and what have you for helping the restaurants and bring them out into the street. But it just triggered one thought real quick. Sometimes in every problem lies an opportunity. I'm thinking of next year when Union Street's going to get blown up next year. Beginning next year with a major construction project. And I wonder if that's an opportunity to, I know they're going to try to keep Union Street open, but maybe it's only open one way, and maybe that the other way that it's not open opens up a possibility for restaurants out on the street. I know that's tough with construction vehicles, but just to throw the thought out there that maybe Union Street ironically becomes more walkable and what have you, and more beneficial for restaurants to spread out onto the street if the street's actually half closed because of construction.
Yeah, and I think related to that, Tom, if I could, I mean, I think one of the things would be on the list is direct outreach to restaurant owners. And that's something that I think we need a little bit of help with, is just gathering restaurant owners somehow together or independently and figure out, like, would you do this? Like,
Right.
Would you want this? And that was kind of a step that I wasn't sure happened. And I think we would put that on the list, but that would be like spring or summer.
In fact, the whole business outreach never happened because I think the process was so daunting. We were talking about sample sizes and having to post, solicit input, and it just became bigger than we could fathom.
Yeah, and it happened quick, and that is good. That's the expectation coming out of the spring too, that it'll be happening quick as well to get back outside. Okay, so that's very helpful. And then so the last one I'll talk about is we were very successful with Mass DOT. They had a shared streets and spaces program, and we opted to go for pedestrian safety improvements. So we did a crosswalk on Pleasant Street, just kind of next to the Ferry Street project. So it has the rapid flashing beacons. And then we did the crosswalk by Nashwanik Pond to get over to 50 Payson. And then we did a walkway from the high school to Nonotuck. So those are all permanent improvements. And then we did the temporary bike lane. So they re-released that program, and they kind of revamped it a little bit. They do have a target for winter spaces, but the idea that has hatched kind of quickly, and it's kind of bits and pieces of things that everyone has talked about, was the idea of utilizing the parking lot at 50 Payson for a gathering area in the come spring, when we expect people to want to get back outside. Through ECA and Pascagoula, they tested this idea with the blue dots in the parking lot, and then ECA gave grants to the two musicians to play on that day, that weekend. and there was a cap of people, but it was overall really successful. And it seemed like that would be something that we could try to do again. So with this funding, they fund capital items, so sort of infrastructure. And through a couple of conversations, they will fund, or our expectation is we could apply for and ask for funding for things like a mobile stage and a PA system. So through ECA, I've been talking to Pascalina, and this is a project that she's kind of spearheading at the moment, that those are needs that ECA has identified for quite some time that would be useful for them to have a stage and a PA system so that they could do these outdoor events more easily with their own pieces of equipment. So the way we tie it all together is that we would use 50 Payson for this space for a series of 3 or 4 weekends come April and May. So all of our funds, if we got them, would have to be spent by May 31st. So they're kind of capping it off like this is between now and May. You have to come up with some project ideas and spend the money, and you can walk away with equipment at the end of it, which is very useful. So the idea is that we would set up 50 Payson for, like a Saturday afternoon of a series of events come early spring. And when ECA discussed this, they have a small amount of money left in their grant program for artists. So they were agreeable to using that grant funding source left to fund artists to be at that space in April and May. And so we're talking about a couple other pieces of infrastructure, like, some kind of like you can bring in fake grass and create this spot and convert 50 Payson into this space for the weekend. Anecdotally, the mayor is very supportive of this. The mayor was very supportive of the idea of using 50 Payson as it's kind of a city controlled parcel property. And as we are a little bit lower with activity, the parking lot is really just kind of underutilized. And so it's an opportunity that we're going to explore. That grant application is due January 6th. So there are these 2 items that come up before I think this group has another meeting. And so on this one, I just wanted to make sure you all were aware that we were going to do it, because I think in general, it's intended to support people coming to Easthampton, and that we would have this plan in place for April. That's kind of like the month that we're expecting to be kind of coming out of our cocoon and getting ready to do stuff. And then the beauty of it could be that this stage and the PA and any lighting or anything like that could be then owned by ECA and used again. So, Pascalina's really bright and was already thinking about, okay, so after May, we could fundraise or somehow or other get some funds to continue this, either in the summer or in the fall again, and just kind of keep that pattern of trying to bring people into Easthampton. So again, I just wanted to bring it to this group. We've talked a lot about these kinds of ideas in this group, and I just wanted to make sure that it didn't catch anyone totally off guard that we're going to make the application in the beginning of January.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Cool. So that concludes for now.
Jeff, I think I asked at a meeting you weren't at about, is there any movement on the potential approved development project on Cottage Street?
We have not heard anything directly from that property owner in a while. They got their permit reissued, and they have another year, like on the permit to do it. But I don't have any direct information on the status of that. That's the Jim's package store you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, they were going to presumably build 19 housing units where the gas station is.
Yeah. I mean, we want that project. That's a great project for that section of Cottage Street with 19 units, and 4 of them are permanently affordable.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great project, and we would do anything within reason to kind of like support it happening. So I just haven't heard anything lately.
Okay.
Our minutes from November pointed to a conversation that was sort of being had tangential to the originator of the idea. So Casey, you're with us this time. So I wonder if there's been any further thinking about coordinating with ECA about grants for public art and music that go beyond what Jeff just shared about the MassDOT funding. Any thoughts there? Any conversations been had?
No, except for the grant proposals that went out. A lot of them are music based, they're performance based. A bunch of them are going to be streaming and stuff like that. But yeah, that's their gist of their grant funds are performance based, and they want to try to get people out. Aside from that, there's no coordinated effort conversations about business developed, economic developed events. There's no talk about art walk. There's no talk about public stuff. So no, it's all individual artist based that is meant to be publicly shown, but that's it. And that's the end of my term on that committee. I'm no longer re-upping with them. I'm better off as a sponsor or a host or a participant. I can't do any of that stuff if I'm a member. So I think that for me as a business owner, I got to work with them as a sponsor, as a host. Financially, it's more important for me to do that than for me to be guiding them. So that's going to be a little bit of shift. But ECC is setting aside, well, we're talking about setting aside 15% of their budget, which looks like it might be $1,500 to do a program, maybe whether or not it's more public art, mural, or something that would be visual, that would be permanent for the city to have. So that's the one thing that they're working on as far as, walking tours and stuff like that. They want to do more of visual art as opposed to ECA is doing more of a performance-based public interaction. But I think that obviously that's going to be a focus come the spring and summer, is to try to do more events, whether or not it's a taste of Easthampton or whether or not that's partially through the chamber or where that's coming from. But to basically piggyback with whatever elements are going on in the city, to have the arts community be a part of that and to try to tout that as a draw to the city.
Yeah. So moving forward, I do think that there are good reasons for EDIC to have more formal awareness of what ECA is up to. And we've struggled since I've been on EDIC to consistently have that presence from Pasqualina. It's been good to have what Casey. Are there other thoughts about how we might strengthen that relationship in meetings? Or is there some other approach we might take to that?
I'm not sure. ECA has really sort of changed. It's evolved from what it used to be. It used to be a little bit more of a free-flowing, evolving concept. Now it's really sort of focused on a program-based youth initiative. Now it's the grants thing. They got an artist and residency program in 2 locations, Eastworks and City Space. So they're sort of still doing public art as a subcommittee and still doing other subcommittees, but as a whole, they're more of a program-based organization, and not, and the idea is to figure out what their programs are, but it's not so interactive with the public currently because of the situation. And maybe that's something they'll focus a little bit more on, but Pasqualina sort of gotten away from the previous volunteers of the city and really sort of forged her own direction with Jeff as far as what the city arts committee is.
Okay.
I think I did talk to, I've talked to Pasqualina about it, and I think it's just a matter of it's difficult to get someone to attend another meeting.
Yeah.
But one thing that we talked about was her providing a written report of some sort much more frequently. And as I was just thinking about it and listening to Casey, I think pretty soon, I think it would be a good opportunity at a minimum to have even if it's just written, so like at the next meeting, maybe like a look ahead, like looking at the year ahead,
Hmm.
at least to give the EDIC a sense of what, because I think there's some, there's ECA, and then there's a public art subcommittee. There's also an art walk subcommittee, and there's the Cottage Street Cultural District subcommittee. So, and there's also a poetry subcommittee. There's a lot of these subcommittees, and I think pretty soon there should be at least some idea of what's on the horizon. Although I think it's like a cloudy horizon, just because we're not really sure what the spring is going to look like. But I think each of those kind of subgroups are trying to figure out how could they be best prepared for the spring. And I think, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And just one of the things is that, but as far as ECA, the committee members are really not aware of what's going on in public art, really what's going on with the other subcommittees. They're not well connected either. You know what I mean? And not that Art Walk is happening, but ECA the committee doesn't talk about Art Walk. That's the subcommittee. The subcommittee does all the work and does all the orchestrating. And then that information doesn't really get translated too well to ECA. ECA has just been really focused on the grants initiative and the residency, and that's all they're sort of focused on. So it's just even a disconnect between ECA and the subcommittees. So for the subcommittees to get their information, the EDIC is just another gap that just there's a lot of information to pass around. And if it was obviously written out easier for us to share, that would be great.
Yeah.
So
I don't disagree with what Casey's saying about, it has evolved in the past, really in the past 2 years, it's evolved quite a bit. And then the Futures Project it did help, but it's been trying to reform, like even the relationship between the coordinating committee and its subcommittees. So to try to get a stronger reporting system where the subcommittees are reporting to the coordinating committee, at least updates. I think that should be taking shape in the next several months, like in the spring. That's one of the projects we're trying to rebuild that. And I think once that's done, I think it'll be easier for ECA to then report to like the EDIC as an update. So it's a work in progress. I think it's going to take us the rest of the winter to kind of finish setting it up so it's a little bit better for communication. I think communication across the board is a challenge, internally, like amongst those committees. But then I think, even at the website page or like the whole city, like how are we transmitting a lot of the information? There's still not a direct, solution to that problem. I think that problem is overriding a lot of our work, a lot of our different departments' work. So it's hard. That's a tougher one.
Yeah, so that's something to continue to noodle on. I like the idea of looking at the year ahead element to January or February meeting, and maybe not necessarily limited to ECA, but all right, everybody, let's do the all call. What's coming that we think is coming, because this is going to be another weird year, probably.
Yeah. And if we get this idea of the local rapid recovery, if we have a consultant, that February would be when the consultant comes on board. And I really do believe that that's kind of, and this is a helpful conversation for me to have, because I think it's really pulling all that together into like a cohesive, we need kind of like this COVID response plan, like this document that would pull all these things into one place and help us all kind of navigate not just this coming spring, but the spring and summer and fall look like they're going to be kind of challenges until, this whole conversation about what happens next, vaccine and all that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So barring further things to say about ECA and coordination, Tom had brought up that Casey Corsello made a presentation to City Council recently about Blueprint Easthampton, which is essentially an asset mapping process and resource identification process that is a foundation for small businesses to be successful. Is to, how do I do this? Where do I get support for the following X, Y, and Z things that make a small business go? So ways to support entrepreneurs. I will continue to follow up with Casey Corsella to see if she can join us for January or February's meeting to talk with us about that. Tom, is there anything in particular that you would like to highlight just based on what you've heard or read already?
No, I was just pleased with the concept. Again, I stumbled across her presentation. She actually did it sort of during citizen speak time at a council meeting. I'm not even sure she was on the agenda. And I know the mayor was cheerleading it from the sidelines. And I don't know in what capacity Casey even did this. I don't know if there's a committee, if she's a committee of one, I'm not sure. But she was definitely getting encouragement from the city to proceed with this blueprint East Hampton. And, I didn't hear, again, her presentation was very short because she was up against a public hearing, I believe, but it just sounded like something that, the city's been trying to get in place for a long time, this blueprint, if you will.
Yeah, I like my favorite thing about it is that it represents at least one element of a larger long-term pursuit of identifying what data sources exist and getting data in the first place about things that we have just little mini dribs and drabs about, anecdotes here and there. Okay, let's source all that into one place in a systematic way. And so I think, yes, the mayor is solidly behind that, and just generally understanding better what data do we have that would help us understand what the possibilities are, what the current needs are, what the current assets are. So
Right.
great. Is there any other new business that anyone would like to bring up in the last 6 minutes? Dave Boyle.
I had a question for Jeff. Have you had any inquiries, just general inquiries regarding the Manchester's building?
A little bit, but nothing of substance yet. But it's the company is Plotkin.
Yeah.
And they're a big outfit, and they've done big projects. So it is something that we're looking at and trying to the couple people who have reached out to me, I've pushed kind of towards the downtown strategic plan, which
Yeah.
doesn't call out that building specifically because it was not on anyone's radar screen at that time, but it calls out a general approach of things that we would be looking for and hope for in that building. So, it could be, reusing the existing spaces, and on a small scale, we amended the zoning so that really if someone can really fit in there without really big changes to the building, then they can go right in. It could be all the way to something really, really big and just like transformational, but we have not heard that part.
Yeah, no, okay. The only reason I mentioned it was, if something happens, that's great. I have heard nothing myself, but next year we're gonna be looking at the future use of the schools and stuff. And I was thinking that parcel and the one next to it should maybe become part of those discussions, just from the 30,000 foot view and creative thinking a little bit. I don't, the world's changing. Union Street's gonna get torn up. I think a lot of things that we took for granted just might not apply. You're right, Plotkin, they're well equipped, but I just thought people should keep in the back of their mind that something different should happen. Something different might happen there, not should, might.
Right. Yeah, and
It's
just
a
as
little bit of like site-based treatment at the end of the housing production plan, doesn't it? Because it's arrival on the scene of a possible interesting site came pretty conveniently in that last process of the HPP being written up.
Yeah, interestingly, in the 2014 plan, the housing production plan, that parcel was listed, and it's definitely carried over to this plan. As there's a lot of parcels that would be possibilities for more significant multiple story kind of mixed use or affordable housing or even mixed use housing. So yeah, the timing of that is pretty good, and I think that's the idea of the downtown plan is, if a parcel does become available, that affordable housing would be really great. Mixed uses, so there's a couple of great examples in Northampton on Pleasant Street, the lumber yard and the Live 155 building. I mean, those would be, they might be a little tall. I don't remember, but you know, the idea of those mixed use buildings could be great if something substantial is going to happen. If not, getting tenants in each side of that, you know, that would also be pretty valuable, to not have them sit vacant for a long time.
Oh, sure.
Can I just ask, maybe Tom knows this information, what is going on with the future use committee of the buildings?
There is not, to my knowledge, there is not a future use committee. As you know, when the school ultimately declares those buildings surplus, they become the property of the city. And I believe the mayor has incorporated the part that takes a look at the reuse of those, Casey. The mayor has incorporated that in that whole downtown study. So it's sort of a part of that. There's not, I don't believe that there's going to be unless I'm wrong here, Jeff, I don't believe there's going to be like a separate and distinct future use committee set up. I believe it's
I
going to be.
think there might be, but I think what was holding back though was what we're working on now is what is the move-in date of the school. I think what you said is correct, but I thought they were gonna at some point be more specific.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be under the umbrella. I guess what I was getting at, Dave, is
Yeah.
I think it'll be under the umbrella of that downtown
Well, maybe so.
study. What was that called, Jeff? The downtown.
That's the strategic plan.
Yeah.
It
It's all
does
part of
call,
that.
it does call out for a committee to steer that whole process. And then Casey, if you wanted to take a look, that downtown plan has 2 chapters devoted to the schools, you know, baseline information and data about the schools. And then there was a community visioning session about what would be desirable there. And then there were some criteria kind of established. And the idea was that those couple chapters would be taken up by the committee and moved to the kind of like the strategic plan is step 1, then the reuse committee would be step 2. And I will just take this opportunity to give an update, which is that I did apply for a planning grant. So from the state, this is what it actually is what funded the downtown strategic plan. The first part 1. It also was what we used for funding for the housing production plan. And we did get $21,000 to have a consultant assist us with assist the committee in preparing the RFP. And so it would take the downtown plan and it would work with the committee to come up with an RFP. And I think it is in the plan that one of the ideas was not just one RFP, but we could set it up so there's 3 different RFPs for each of the different schools, because then we can really focus on what uses are we thinking are most desirable. So that's going to be the work of that committee. So again, I got the funding, and it's more of just a timing issue right now that we have until FY22 to spend that grant. So we're kind of pushing it probably till like late spring. We would probably start that process and then go into the summer next fall, because it'd be too soon to start the discussions right now. So we're kind of just pushing it to like late spring, maybe next summer, and then we would run the summer to next fall, next winter, and then we would be much closer to be getting ready to release an RFP. So there is the outline of a plan for that to happen, like probably in the spring.
The other point, Jeff, that Dave was alluding to is that there's some discussion now between the city and the contractors to accelerate the school project if that cost is not prohibitive. We're looking into that now, and to try to make this a short story, that's all COVID related. We're just trying, you can imagine the ventilation, circulation, air issues in those old school buildings, and trying to get the kids back in those buildings versus can we get the new school open any sooner that would allow the kids to go into a building that has state-of-the-art ventilation, what have you. So it's possible that all the kids are in the new school in January of 22, which is basically 12 months from now. The original schedule had, I believe, the Whitebrook kids moving in January of 22, and the elementary kids not moving in until August of 22. So in effect, they're accelerating the elementary part potentially. This is all just pie in the sky right now, but potentially accelerating that project by 8 months. And Casey, back to your question, I'm not trying to pass the buck here, but the protocol that I think happens here is the school building committee is in charge of overseeing construction, if you will. The day the construction's done, I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but when the construction is done, the school building committee basically disbands. We're done. The school committee, once they've moved into the new building, the school committee then has to declare the building surplus. Then they become the property of the city. So now that falls into, now the mayor has 3 empty school buildings that, okay, now what do I do with these? So the school building committee and the school committee basically lose their say in that reuse. And it becomes what Dave and Jeff were saying, part of that strategic plan. Yes, it sounds like it'll be a separate committee, but a committee that I assume will then ultimately report back to the mayor and back to the city council.
Yeah, and to build off that real quick is the hope all along was that we don't wait until all the kids are out to start this process. Like there is a possibility of having the RFPs ready, if not released and responded to. So before that happens, when everyone's out, if there's a question about the mechanics of that, whether that can happen before it's issued as surplus. But there's a concerted effort happening to try to be as ready as possible. Sorry, my family just got home. So we're really working on that. Tom, can I have a question? Do you have any idea as to when it might be more definitive if the pace of if the schedule is speeded up? Do you have any idea of like when that might kind of be identified?
Yeah, all we're waiting for now is obviously to accelerate that project by 8 months, Jeff. Everybody had to go back to the drawing board to come up with a figure. So all the contractors, the subcontractors, if we have people working, 12-hour days instead of 8-hour days or 7-hour, what's the cost factor to all of that? So that's what the committee's waiting for. I believe that will all be in place we have a meeting scheduled for January 12th. And I believe that meeting should provide the information the committee needs. And I believe they'll be prepared to make a decision that night. As I think most of you have heard all along, there was a significant bid savings that we did not anticipate when we went out to bid. And the thought is that we could use some of that bid savings to fund the acceleration of the project. Now, if they come back and tell us it's $5 million, it's not going to work. If they come back and tell us it's $1 million, that makes perfect sense. I can't speak for the mayor, but what I think she's trying not to do is invest serious dollars into the old schools to improve the ventilation systems. Just doesn't make a lot of sense. If they told you that Maple Street needed a $300,000 investment and Center needed a $300,000 investment, why would you do that? I know it's important for the kids to get back to school, but you'd rather throw the $600,000 into the new building to get it done quicker rather than put it into those old school buildings. So January 12th might be a key date. And I'm hoping in the back of her mind, the mayor's thinking, okay, if this is going to be accelerated, I need to look at that reuse committee and get that accelerated also. And if I think of it, Jeff, I'll mention it that night at the meeting.
Yeah, no, I might attend that one just to know. I mean, that I apologize, Gwen, but I mean, that changes some of this. But the good news is that we have the funding. It was just, initially it was getting shifted to match the schedule.
Yep.
So now it would be rolling that back quite a bit.
I believe that meeting is January 12th at 4:30. And I'm fairly certain that's the only item on the agenda.
Interesting.
To get that, nail that down.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that information.
One quick last question, Jeff, about the Manchester building. And I know this might be related to parking, but could those buildings be sold as two separate buildings?
I guess under the realm of anything's possible, I think's probably.
Yeah.
But the way that they're situated inside, I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I guess one would not have any parking. So like if you
Correct.
look at the left side, like the brick side,
Right.
that would have 0 parking really, and then the other side would have more. So, but you don't, like technically the zoning doesn't require parking for older buildings. So,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I think I guess the right response would be anything's possible. Whether that's going to be like what the realtor looks at, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I know when the new building was built, there's basically a garage door between the two of them that could be closed and secured.
Yeah.
And they both have separate entrances and exits. So I think she might have designed that to be separate businesses, before she put the rental business in there, then that went out. So.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, this has been fortifying. I like to see all of you. Thank you for your brains and your questions. And Dave Boyle, thank you for your service. Our next meeting is January 19th, 2021. Surely it will be a better year. It's going to start at 4. It might go to 5:30, depending on how many people want to come and tell us things or ask us questions. Okay? I will try to tell you sooner than later if you can expect 60 or 90 minutes. All right. Have a great night. Nice to see you.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, David Boyle, for everything you've done. It's great.
All right, I'll be around.
Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.